With the flick of her pen, she writes.
Hello, friends. Hello. I am back with another live book circle reading at, you'll never guess where I'm at. I am at Abigail Smiles Crust Bakery in Rockaway Point, and all sorts of yummy bakery treats are surrounding me here as I sit in our live book circle today to read our next chapters of Flying Potion. I want to get us all caught up before we move the book forward, and we're here for chapters 23 through 25. So if you've missed any of the other chapters, the entire audio book is on my YouTube channel in a playlist called Flying Potion Audiobook. And on the podcast, if you're in Spotify, there's also a Flying Potion audiobook playlist, or you can just, in your podcast provider, like for my podcast itself, you can just type in Flying Potion and the search, the podcast, and all the audiobook live book circle readings and chapters will come up for you there. So this is a book we've been reading for our Bringers of the Light Sundays, and I'm excited to get into the next chapters with you. So I do want to say that today is a little bit of a fundraising event as well. Abigail is looking to either raise funds for the purchase of a Little Free Library that we're going to register with Little Free Library and place outside of Crust so that everyone can enjoy it. Or if you have handy person skills and you want to help create a Little Free Library box, because the ones I've seen that are handcrafted are actually the most amazing ones ever that are done with creativity. But Abigail would need some sort of help with generating ideas, and then help with finding the right materials for that. So that could be like a trip to the salvage yard or something. I think she's just looking for either way right now. So if either of those speak to you, you can pop the money in the donation box that I have up by me, and whatever we have there will go towards either the purchase of a Little Free Library box. Or again, if you have ideas and things and you want to collab with Abigail, then, get in touch with her. She is here all this afternoon. She is actually, for everyone that donates or, comes to talk to her about this, she's offering her free homemade chocolate croissants. And they are absolutely amazing. So, without further ado, I want to get into Flying Potion. I'm not going to do anything to bring us up to speed. I'm going to assume either you want to hear these as a standalone, because sometimes they can just be standalone, or you can go back and start with the entire book. This book is not yet published. It's still a work in progress. So again, we're working on it every week here at TLC for the Soul, and bringing you the next chapters for our What's the Week Ahead All About? Bringers of the Light Sunday episodes. But if par chance you're catching this later, all of my ebooks are free to read on my ebook publisher, Smashwords, Apple Books, Google Books, and Barnes & Nobles. And you can catch those links in the show notes wherever you are listening to this show. So I want to thank those of you that looked or saw my little town announcement on the Rockaway Point Lighthouse Bulletin Board, as I do tend to put up a little bit of an announcement around town of where I'm going to be doing the next live book circle readings, and the town newsletter as well, not the Gist, because that's the newspaper, but the town newsletter, which the next time we come around here, we're going to have a naming contest for the town newsletter. Maybe we'll bring that up on Bringers of the Light Sunday. We want to name the town newsletter. It's just a little weekly pamphlet thing that goes out to everybody that's interested in knowing what's up about town for Rockaway Point and our sister city, Tessellock. Without further ado, though, I am going to get into get a drink of water. We don't have any baristas here today, so You've got drinks up at the counter that Abigail can take your drink orders. And other than that, I'm going to go ahead and get started with Chapter 23, Zeta Reticuli, or Route 66. Rockaway Point was experiencing some weird weather phenomenon. On one day it was rainy with wind and ice coming in off the bay, and the next day it was warm and sunny, almost t-shirt weather. One didn't know how to plan for the next day's weather or anything else for that matter. So much was up in the air at that moment, or at this moment, or at the moment. Abigail was working a pastry dough. There she is in the Crust kitchen, and a spoon fell to the floor, and then Rainicourt, our trusty raven familiar, cawed 3 times. Abigail, noting the sign, picked up the spoon and looked at her scrying bowl. A vision of something started to appear. But before she could figure it out, a siren went by, signaling that someone needed help somewhere. Signs, portents, and omens were bombarding her. When a spoon falls, a baby calls, she muttered, trying to decipher each sign, but getting more befuddled with how they all fit together. Is it something with Dakkar? She asked her guides, but they didn't really have the answer because Abigail had already moved on to the next question. Dakkar had left early in the morning for Zeta Reticuli by way of Bringers of the Light HQ. She didn't know how long he'd be gone, and that made her feel forlorn. She decided to set all the signs aside, knowing that if she really needed to know something, her guides would definitely let her know. What was needed now was to detach from outcomes and from having to have all the answers. I'll interject and say easier said than done, but it is a practice we've all been working on. If you've been following us on the channel, that's our guidance that we talked about recently in our February walk and talk, where we went outside and did some fun things and did a little bit of stream of consciousness downloads about navigating the chaos of right now. So check that out if you want more there. But Zeta Reticuli, so now we're to Zeta Reticuli with Dakkar, was one harsh place, Dakkar thought, as he breathed through the oxygen from the pack on his back. Had he made a mistake accepting this assignment? He hadn't thought so until he got to this crazy planet. There was chaos everywhere, and his assignment was to fly in and rescue a VIP from the clutches of the Blue Avenir Army. Well, that part would be easy, he thought, recalling that's how most of his missions went anyway. He could wrap this up pronto if he could find where they were holding this VIP. His intel had said to go right to the center of the planet and look for a sign. It was an old highway sign that the Zeta Reticuli intelligence team had taken from Earth on some old mission back in the 1960s. They had run several recon missions every month, taking in stragglers for questioning, and they'd been particularly focused on Route 66 in the United States, as they'd been bewildered by the highway and odd places along its infamous route. Diamond Dave's famous fish cakes and the Rocket Fuel Cafe, complete with an old saucer their ancestors had used to recon the Earth, signs of that infamous and otherworldly route appeared everywhere around him. Their missions had fizzled out in the late 1970s after a chance meeting with the then President of the United Nations, who made a deal with them if they would stop taking away unsuspecting humans for their investigative experiments. The deal was somewhat suspect, and here we'll focus on what we do want, which is not another run-in with the Zeta Reticuli research teams. Dakkar was looking for an old Route 66 highway sign. He was told by the informant, a very burly Blue Avenir double agent, that he could follow the sign and it would lead him straight to the prisoner. Once he'd bribed the guard, they would release the prisoner to him, and he could use the power in his heart and the flying potion in his jumpsuit to quickly make it back to Earth. That was if the prisoner cooperated. Highcore hadn't told Dakkar the identity of this so-called VIP, but he'd taken a guess when he heard that the dubious and somewhat confounding Handbook de los Santos was involved. Oh, you know what happens every time the Handbook de los Santos is involved. It gets all mysterious. Each time Dakkar had encountered the magical book, something had happened to upgrade him. If this VIP prisoner knew where the Handbook de los Santos was, they hadn't divulged it to the Blue Avenir Army. And with that in mind, Dakkar wanted to very swiftly get this person out and away so he could ask all those questions he'd been saving up about this magical textbook. Chapter 24. A Rescue of Divine Intervention. Well, to start to say something and then not finish the sentence, Polly was so confounded by the puzzle in this Sunday's Rockaway Point gist that she pushed the newspaper aside and looked outside to her backyard. The old birch tree was singing her a song again. That darn tree had had her up all night with some song about new trees and new stars and new flowers. It just kept singing its little heart out with this song. Polly couldn't interpret the tree's messages, and this time she'd had so many signs prior that the tree's song was more confirmation of all these great changes that were coming. Polly looked up as Scratchy entered the kitchen and laid a dead mouse at her feet. Now Scratchy was not one to go out hunting for mice. He preferred langostino and beurre blanc on a bed of wild rice with a side of port and a good porridge stew. But this was a sign for Polly and not his dinner menu. Polly looked at Scratchy and sighed. "Well, we haven't had this come up for a while now, have we, old friend?" She scratched the old tabby behind the ears, and his tail switched with happiness. "Now we know, bringers of the light, that Scratchy continues to confound us with his indecisiveness about being a real person or continuing to hide behind this cat familiar persona. But let's just say he's still a cat for now." All else aside, Rockaway Point was receiving a fresh new breeze across the bay, and both Polly and Abigail were wondering why so many signs and omens, what so many signs and omens were really trying to tell them. Zeta Reticuli was getting warm, Dakkar thought, as the side of the planet he was on made a swift turn towards the sun. The rules of planetary orbits and cycles worked differently out here, and Dakkar had to remember his training on how planets and star systems in these outer belts worked. And then he finally saw what he was looking for. An old Route 66 highway sign stood forlornly in the center of where Dakkar had been tracking a little bug that had promised to show him the sign. Dakkar thanked the bug, which looked like some sort of June beetle, but without the wings and had horns instead of antennae. The beetle took off after something, and Dakkar was left standing beside the Route 66 sign. Now what, he thought. But he didn't have to wait long. The ground dropped out beneath him, and he fell some 50 feet down and then sideways, landing in a pile of freshly mown green grass. What the what, he thought, going for his laser pistol, but realizing it had become dislodged by the fall and had skittered some 59 feet away from him. A stiletto heel stood atop the gun and was attached to a rather shapely leg, which led up to a rather familiar face, and a long muscular arm, which was also holding a laser pistol pointed straight at Dakkar. "Well, we keep meeting like this," the one and only other woman in Dakkar's many lifetimes said with a pout. "And here I had to track you all the way to some dreaded outpost just to have alone time together." Maggie looked down at Dakkar and pondered whether it would be easier on her heart, small as it was right now, to simply shoot Dakkar and end this whole silly cat and mouse game of their affair. Were they having an affair, she tried to remember? And then that all came flooding back. Right, oh goodness, that was 200 lifetimes ago. Now Dakkar had betrothed himself to that silly Abigail Smile. And so we come round again, friends, and back to the start. Dakkar, haunted by his past lovers over past lifetimes, each one wanting him back again. But Maggie had been special. They had meant something to each other. But that was then. Dakkar had planned this lifetime with Abigail, and he was determined for it to work, and he simply wasn't being paid enough to be so far from home and up against yet another trick that he could have so easily managed right back at home. Maggie pouted, and then was going to resort to pleading. She dropped to her knees swiftly, shooing Dakkar's gun further away, all the while pointing her laser pistol right between his eyes. "For old times," she said, touching his hand. Dakkar flinched and then felt that familiar feeling he always had with her. It would be easy to go back there again. But he recalled that Maggie had pledged her love to the dark side, and that he had pledged his to the bringers of the light. and so nothing could bring them back together until one or the other decided to change their affiliation. "Maggie, you know the cost," Dakkar said, meaning he wasn't changing his mind and going back to the dark side. "I do," she said, knowing she loved the darkness too much. "But this was still worth it for one more moment with you." She reached forward and kissed him hard on the mouth. He responded and grabbed her, pulling her into him. At the same time, he flicked the flying potion switch in his jumpsuit. If she wouldn't give in to the light, then he would take her back home and give her over to Hykor. Maybe a week with Tamber and the Yeti of the North would change her mind. They landed softly at Bringers of the Light HQ as Maggie squirmed into Dakkar's arms. She knew what was next. Would she be able to handle Tamber and the Yeti? Would she simply surrender and become an agent of the light? Or would she call in the dark magic arts and easily and effortlessly disappear into the shadows? Only the Handbook de los Santos knew her fate, and for now it wasn't telling. Hykor closed the book and set it back in its magical cabinet. He'd seen everything he needed to see for right now, and with that he looked heavenward and wished for a chance at the best possible outcome regarding everything he'd been allowed to see. Ooh, so wow. Let's take a little break there. Let me just get a sip of my water. And I can see that there have been, as I'm reading, thank you to everyone that's put a little donation in Abigail's donation box. And she did say that no matter what avenue they decide to go, the funds will be used for the Little Free Library. And if there's anything left over, she is going to do something special for the town with any leftover funds. So maybe there'll be another pickle mickle tart or something magical like Abigail creates at our autumn festivals. And for now, though, our crowd has gathered here as I continue my little reading. That's my microphone. Kind of up in front by the doors as you come in. And I've seen everybody kind of come and go, some with your chocolate croissants and some with something else that Abigail has been putting together in the kitchen. Some sort of vegetable risotto popover thing, she told me. But she's going to save me one in the back, so I'm very excited to try that. It sounds amazing. Vegetable risotto popover. All right. Well, before we get any further into that, let's continue with our last chapter, chapter 25. It all goes up right now. Now Maggie stood before Hykor and the High Council at Bringers of the Light HQ. There's a lot of high going on here. She was stoic and held her head high. Hykor, High Council, holding your head high. But this wasn't some sort of inquisition of old. Hykor and the council wanted answers more than anything. Who was running the dark factions that Maggie had pledged herself to? Who was wanting the earth to go back to darkness? Was that even possible right now after so many had raised their consciousness, after the planet herself had risen higher? Tamber and the Yeti of the North entered the High Council chambers. Tamber was not up for anything from Maggie. She'd dealt with darker beings before, and she knew that the way to overcome them was to reach straight for their heart space and fill it with light. Tamber had been serving our planet ever since she'd been rescued from her own failed planet and made to stay here due to the huge amount of power she had within her. It had previously been channeled into rage, but from all her time at Bringers HQ, she'd become highly skilled at redirecting this energy to the light. Tamber stood before Maggie. "Well," Hykor said, "are you willing to tell us what we want to know?" Maggie felt like she could explode at any moment. This line of questioning was wearing thin on her, and Tamber could sense that something was about to shift, and if she didn't take action soon, she would be facing an empty room as Maggie used her energy to leave somehow. Tamber felt that someone on the inside was helping Maggie, but she hadn't been able to determine who that someone was. The Yeti of the North didn't care about any of this. Just as Maggie was about to utter some garbled incantation under her breath, Tamber reached her hand out and touched Maggie's heart, while the Yeti took both his hairy hands and lifted Maggie into the magic tank. The magic tank would simply strip her of all darkness and could use its power to help many people. This experiment with Maggie would allow them to see if they could use the magic tank on more beings to help them ascend. The tank door closed, and Maggie was enveloped in a light of immense power. Green, gold, purple, yellow. Her eyes rolled back in her head. The Yeti and Timbre figured that had gone way too easily. Maybe Maggie wasn't as formidable an agent of darkness as they thought. Maggie rolled into a deep trance state, and from there she would stay for the next 48 hours. The magic tank would be opened, and everyone would see what came out. For now the world sighed a deep, peaceful sigh. And in Rockaway Point, Abigail awaited Dakkar's return into her arms. Polly decided she had finally figured out the puzzle that had been confounding her for so long. Mindy Smatherton and Benjamin Black were moving into something more serious, and spring had finally sprung on the magical little town by the ocean. And with that, friends, we complete our little flying potion live book circle read here at Crust. I'm just so interested to go find my risotto tart or popover, whatever it is. And I'm thankful that you all came out to see me here, or if you're listening to this later on the podcast or on my YouTube channel, thank you so much for joining me. And I am going to be in Tessel Lock next time for our next live book circle reading. I haven't decided where yet, but we will let you know. As soon as I know, you will know. So again, I want to thank everyone for joining me here, for everyone that's donated or talked to Abigail about the little free library. And with that, I bid you all a beautiful adieu. Take care. Spring has sprung at the Chai House Tea Bar. Go see Cassie for her Lavender Lassie and Fairy Friends Frappe. 2 drinks that will bring out the magical spring in your step this time of the year in Rockaway Point. Let the Chai House Tea Bar whip you up a special treat to take with you on that spring picnic or outdoor outing. Everything's happening at Chai House Tea Bar, Rockaway Point's premier drink location.